Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's a weekly show about politics. I'm Marcos Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Alabeld, and we are kind of riding high, Carrie, because last week when we talked, it was before the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, and we were cautiously optimistic that Democrats would be doing well. And not only did they do well, but the Democrats won the seat by, I think we're at 11 points, 11, 12 points. It was a blowout. It was a blowout in the kind of election that traditionally has hurt Democrats because it was in the middle of April, beginning of April, not a typical election season. Yet we saw incredible turnout from Democratic constituencies, including the youth vote. And it has triggered, Carrie, a bit of weird soul searching amongst Republicans. They're finally starting to realize that maybe they have an electoral problem. And so to join us to talk about this, because this is the best topic. It is so much fun. I love when we get to talk about Republican problems.
I think we should say too that the timing, I'm pretty sure the timing of the election was not by accident. That was set by the Republican legislature, the Republican lawmakers, because they figured it would be low turnout if it was in this like random time, So I think there was some element of them trying to sort of, rig it in their favor and then just completely coming up short. Okay. No, I will not interrupt you anymore.
No, so I think we should bring our guest on from the very top to talk about this because he's been one of the most prominent commentators on Republican challenges. This, from the last election cycle. He's Simon Rosenberg. He's a longtime friend. He's been he's been on the show a couple of times. He was formerly the president of the New Democrat Network. Now he's been at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, a bunch of party committees. Now he is on Substack. He is, you can find him at Hopium Chronicles with Simon Rosenberg. And guys, it's good. It's good. If you enjoyed Simon talking about Republican, the likelihood of a Democratic victory in the 2022 midterm election, when everybody else said it was going to be a red wave, and Simon was one of the very few, Simon Rosenberg, Joe Trippi, he was Howard Dean's former campaign manager, Carrie and I at Daily Kos. We were a tiny, tiny group of people, and Simon was the foremost person pushing back against that on Twitter and with the national political press. And so his stuff is freaking awesome. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Marcos. It's sort of old-fashioned blogging all over again. It's been fun.
It's Back to the Future. It really is. And so the reason we wanted Simon on, one is to celebrate the fact that we won this Supreme Court in 50-50 Wisconsin, and it wasn't even close. But he's starting to talk about something that is so simple that it's a wonder that nobody else has talked about this. And his sole premise is that Democrats have gotten really good at winning 51% of the vote. And we've done that in multiple election cycles now in a row, in presidential elections and in key swing states. His whole brand new idea, which again should not be that groundbreaking, but his idea is that why don't we go from 51% to 55%? Whoa! So, Simon, why isn't this sort of conventional wisdom?
Well, there are a couple pieces of this, right? So first of all, from 1992 to 2004, we averaged 47% in those four presidential elections around the time that we met, Marcos, a long time ago. And as you remember, I did a lot of work, as did you and others, to say, hey, there's this new coalition coming for Democrats full of Hispanics and millennials, and that if we run into that coalition, we can expand our vote and get stronger. And in the last four elections, since we did that together, starting in the 2005-2006 cycle, we've averaged 51%. So we jumped 4 points. And now I think we have to sort of go through a similar process again, where we think about jumping another 4 points, getting up to 55, and really trying to not just win the election, but break the back of MAGA, right? To beat them so badly that we start to loosen their dark grip on the Republican Party. So this is not just a partisan thing. This is a pro-democracy thing, right? Because we need to not feel every election that if we stumble, our democracy could be gone. We need to get to a place where the threat of MAGA has been diminished. And I think the only way we're going to do that is by really crushing them in the election. And so I wrote this piece about a month ago and saying, our goal now should be to get to 55, to look at 4 groups, but there could be more. I'm just putting out an initial 4 groups. Younger voters, Hispanics, where we lost a little bit of ground, which we need to gain back. Never MAGA, never Trumpers, Republicans who've been untethered from their party. And also then finally, people affected by the politics of abortion. And I say people because I think it's both men and women. And I think we just don't know yet the true promise of what we can do with the abortion issue. I think we have an inkling, as we saw in Wisconsin, and we saw in Michigan, and we've seen in Kansas. But I think there's more to that issue. So the premise here is that we should be working now to grow our vote, not, to expand, to go on offense, to expand demographically and geographically, and take more real estate, because they've abandoned so much real estate by their lurch to the right, that we shouldn't just accept a normal electoral victory. We should go for something really big. And that's the premise. And it's on my Substack. I wrote the original memo called Get to 55 is the idea behind it.
Let me just say why I love this so much. Number one, I love anything that's aspirational, right? I love anything where you're actually setting a goal and going towards it rather than be reactive. Like, this is what I always strive to do in my writing, my body of writing. You can't do it in every piece, but in my body of writing, what I'm hoping to do is to help people how they view news in election cycle, how they can help shape the news in an election cycle, right? Or in a news cycle, so that, they're not reacting to the news. They start to get into a pattern of how the lens through which they see the news, and then they can talk about the news to their friends, to their relatives, etc. That's one thing. The other thing is this idea of saving democracy. What Republicans have proven is they're not going to let go of Donald Trump just because they lose 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. That's not going to be enough. We've got to actually crush the MAGA movement. We've actually got to probably destroy the Republican Party so that something else can arise. I'm not saying we're destroying a legitimate conservative pro-democracy movement forever. But the Republican Party is not a legitimate conservative pro-democracy movement. It is, it's anti-democracy, and they're not going to let go of Trump. They've had the chance over and over again to do it, and they keep on not having the guts, not having the wherewithal, not having the strategy, not being cohesive enough to do it. And so, we basically have to join together to destroy that party until someone can, some other version of it can arise, regardless of what that version is called.
Yeah, Carrie, the hope we have, right, is that after now, all that political commentary, Marcos, that you mentioned last cycle, the premise of it was, hey, they had just lost 2 elections in a row. And usually when a party gets beat twice in a row, they run away from the politics that failed. The Republicans ran towards it, right? And so what I argued was that we were probably going to do better in the election than people anticipated because, there was an anti-MAGA majority, and the anti-MAGA majority had voted in very large numbers in 2 consecutive elections against them. And instead of running away from that, they ran towards it, and it was going to limit their potential gains in the election. Well, the same thing is happening in this election again, because, DeSantis looked at Trump, looked at the electorate that we're seeing, saw the huge gains that we had in the battleground states. Remember, we didn't just hold our own in the battleground. We gained ground in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. Incredible performance, right? So Ron DeSantis looks at all that and says, I'm going to run to Trump's right. I'm going to be just as MAGA as Trump. And so now, to your point, Carrie, it's not just Trump. It's now the whole party is escalating. You're seeing the escalation in Nashville. You're seeing, wild legislation in Texas and Florida. And I think that voters understand that something's gone wrong with Republicans. They've gone too far. Even Bob Iger from Disney took this incredible shot at DeSantis. He didn't just dissent from DeSantis. He took a shot at him, right? The head of Disney. Does Ron DeSantis think he's going to get elected president by taking on Mickey Mouse? It's sort of the craziest thing ever, right? And so they are becoming more extreme, more captive to their extremist bubble, and they're abandoning real estate. And we would be reckless and irresponsible if we didn't try to claim back some of that territory that they're giving us right now through their extremism. So I'm very optimistic. And I'll tell you that after Wisconsin, which was an enormous victory, we got to 55, which is that number I'm hoping that we get to. We've got an election in Jacksonville, Florida on May 16th. Republican, largest city in Florida, held by a Republican mayor. It's currently a Republican seat. The guy who's running as a Republican is a big DeSantis ally, part of the old boys club. We've got an incredibly talented Democratic candidate running named Donna Deegan. If we go into the home of DeSantis and Trump and flip the largest city in Florida, that's the way we have to be thinking now. We have to go get new stuff, expand our coalition geographically and demographically, and go on offense here, because they're giving it to us, as we just saw in Wisconsin. And if we don't take it, shame on us, because it's what we need to do now. But it requires, Kerry, to your point, a different way of thinking, right? It's about, man on the moon, right? We got to get to 55. I've laid out some ideas of how we get there. And also, just one last point on this is that one of the most concrete thing I'm proposing in this memo is the idea of launching a national youth voter registration campaign this summer. It is not okay for us that the people who are most democratic vote the least. We've got to get young people's participation in our elections up. If we can do that alone, as I lay out in my memo, if we just get under 45-year-old voters to be voting at their population distribution, right, not at something crazy, then we'll win the next election by 10 points. We'll get to 55 just by doing that one thing. But there's more that we can do. So I think that this is a mindset change, right? That we were defensive in a defensive crouch last cycle. We weren't playing offense. Now we got to go on offense. I think you feel it in the family. I think we're getting there together. And I'm excited about what we can do together in the next year and a half.
So Kerry likes your 55% plan because it's aspirational and because it seeks to destroy a destructive force in our democracy. Yep. I'll tell you why I like it.
Well, the American Taliban, Marcos, right? I mean, you're
yes.
You're the one who coined this a long time ago.
I like it because of math. Right. When you're talking about winning by 51, you're looking at a 49%. Obviously, it doesn't, it's the libertarians and whatever, but the elections are so close that any sort of fluke movement, like, Comey announcing a new investigation in Hillary Clinton's emails, all you got to do is move those numbers 1 or 2 points, and then you've reversed it, right? You're now on the bad end of that 49%. Now, from 51 to 55, you're thinking, it's just 4 points, right? But that's the difference between winning by 2 and winning by 10. And then we have elections like we had in Wisconsin last week, where there was no drama. We just saw early numbers come in. We knew they looked good, and we could just celebrate the entire night away, as opposed to wondering, are there any late ballots coming in Milwaukee that'll bail us out? Because you know what? I don't really want to go through what we went through in 2016 in Wisconsin, or even 2020, when I was up at 3 a.m. in California, looking at those late precincts coming in from Milwaukee, barely putting Biden over, because it looked for a while that, oh my God, is Trump going to win again? I don't want that. I want an early night, Simon. And so 55 gives us, clearly it makes it easier, and it gives us that cushion. And you've written, Simon, that we're already hitting 55 in a lot of our battleground states.
Can I talk about that? Because I think this is really important, because this is why this is not pie in the sky, right? It's not pie in the sky because we already, through strategy and investment, jumped from 47 to 51. So we've already jumped 4 points. We did this already, right? This was not an accident that we ended up at the coalition that we have now. But in this last election, which was supposed to be a bad election for us, red wave election, we got to 59 in Colorado, 57 in Pennsylvania, 55 in Michigan, 54 in New Hampshire, 52 in New Mexico, 51.5 in Georgia, 51.5 in Arizona, 51.2 in Wisconsin. So, we're already in the 50s, right? I mean, one thing to keep in mind for your audience is that the Democratic Party is now the majority party in America, right? We've been winning more than 50% of the vote regularly. We haven't done that since the 1940s. It's been 80 years since we've had this kind of regular performance. And we were up in the 50s in all these battleground states that are really these consequential states where we had this sort of, incredible struggle with the Republicans. And so when you're the Republicans, the reason you're hearing, as you said in your introduction, that they're expressing a lot of fear and worry right now is that for us to have gotten up to 55% in Michigan and 57 in Pennsylvania in a bad year is scary stuff for them. And it's why I think we've had the debate about MAGA in the battlegrounds, and MAGA's lost. And their two leading candidates are all MAGA. And I just will tell you, in every bone in my body, I'd rather be us than them heading into 2024. I think Ron DeSantis has made some of the most extraordinary political misjudgments that I've ever seen a major candidate make. And it's not just on the 6-week abortion ban. I mean, Marcos, one of the things you should do is do a segment on his immigration proposals that are going to probably get voted in. It's the most extreme anti-immigrant legislation in modern American history. And it's barely cracked, because he's doing so many other crazy things. It's barely cracked through the news. But he's chosen, rather than being Kemp in Georgia or being DeWine, he chose to be Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, what an idiot, right? And they just misread the room. They misread the election. And I think he's now not only tanking in the primary, he's made himself unelectable in the general. He can't win a presidential election on a 6-week abortion ban. He just can't do it. And it's just amazing what a train wreck Ron DeSantis' campaign has become.
It's a very classic historical battle or historical war mistake, which is to fight the last war or the last election cycle. Yeah. And that's exactly what he's doing. I mean, so let me just, I want to say, just to build on your point, like if you look at Michigan too, and I'm from Michigan, so there's a special place in my heart for it, but 55 in Michigan, which is exactly what you're talking about. And look at what that state now, because, and we cannot forget this, they undid the gerrymandering, right? They had an independent commission redraw the districts to make them fair. And now Democrats control the executive and both chambers of the legislature. And now you're getting, pro LGBTQ stuff through. You're getting pro union stuff through. You're getting all kinds of really good, really powerful pro democracy, pro big D Democrat stuff through. It's not like, we're trying to like work around the edges. And that's what the Wisconsin Republicans, I'm sure, are so afraid of right now. Now that they don't have control anymore of the Supreme Court, and this idea that potentially they could be the next Michigan if the gerrymander maps were made more fair. But let me just read this.
The court is likely to overturn the gerrymandering in Wisconsin, which is probably the most aggressive in the entire country.
I think it is the most aggressive in the whole country. It's the most undemocratic state in America today, with North Carolina being a close behind, by the way.
Yeah. And Republicans know now that they can't win a lot of these states if they don't rig them through gerrymandering. They do not have popular opinions. They do not push a popular agenda. Democrats do. And that's showing whenever we're given, even in the battlegrounds, a fair shot, right? But what, to your point about some Republicans waking up to this and being fearful, being just downright scared, there's this quote that I read in the New York Times from Representative Nancy Mace,
the best
in South Carolina, right? And she's kind of, she's not very MAGA. I mean, she's bowed to Trump a little bit because everybody seems to think they have to, but she's a, sort of a semi-reality based Republican, right? And she's quoted in the New York Times on a piece about abortion, saying, if we can just show that we care just a little bit, that we have some compassion, that we can show the country our policies are reasonable. But because we keep going down these rabbit holes of extremism, we're just going to keep losing. And I have to say, just the idea that she's setting this very low bar for the Republican Party.
A little bit.
If we could just show that we care just a little bit, that we have just a tiny sense of compassion and decency, maybe we can win a smidge, not too much, a tad, just a sprinkling. Maybe we can win some elections. I mean, that is just such a low bar. And as our front pager Laura Clausen, who wrote about it, noted, like, that's a low bar that even the Republican Party still can't get over. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah. Listen, I think that for your audience here is that we need to sort of reset our heads a little bit. Joe Biden has been a good president. The country is better off. The Democratic Party is strong, right? They're weak and divided. They're a reckless, they're a wrecking ball through American society. And we have to flip the kind of, the red wavy kind of narrative of American politics, that we're the weak party, we're the divided party, all these things. It's the exact opposite of all that. And we have to live, take the win, live in this place of strength, because strength allows you to expand and grow bigger, right? And, we are living in a time of unprecedented resources. Our grassroots who are scared of MAGA are giving our candidates and our party committees unprecedented amounts of money. And we have to have an expansion mindset, a mindset of abundance and not scarcity in the way that we approach our politics. And I think that's hard for Democrats, right? We are always being outspent, and they're much bigger and they're meaner and all those things, but it's not true anymore. It's changed. I mean, in many of these races, our candidates outraised Republicans by 4 to 5 to 1. That's never happened before in modern American politics. And so, it's a mindset change. It's it's JFK. It's a man on the moon. Like, we just got to go there. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get there, but we have to try, and we have to try because it's the right thing for the country, and frankly, it's the right thing for the Republican Party. I mean, there are lots of Republicans that I think, and we know this, right? All the never Trumpers, never MAGA, Bill Kristol, Reed Galen, all these folks, they're working cooperatively with us to bring this about. It's why I'm so optimistic, is that I think that the never MAGA, never Trumper wing of the former Republicans that they consider themselves to be, that wing is growing. There's permission structure being created for more people to join that movement. We need that movement to be very strong and to be in essence a coalition with us, as if we were in a parliamentary democracy. Their narrow party, with 5%, 8% of the vote would have joined us. Liz Cheney would have gone into the government, right, and been a cabinet official. And we have to create that kind of virtual alliance. It doesn't really happen in our system, right, of government, but we need to do it in practice because we need them on board. And at some point, a center-right party will reemerge and they'll fold back into that party. But for now, there are allies in this fight, and thank God they are. So I'm very bullish and optimistic right now. I think what happened in Wisconsin was incredible. And I want to say for your audience again, I'm sorry if I've gone on too long here, but this is happening because of everyone who's listening and watching today. It's happening because regular Americans, proud patriots, have gotten up and they're making their phone calls, they're doing their texting, they're writing their postcards, they're giving money. Because of this remote technology now, you can be living in the Bay Area and making calls into Wisconsin or into Jacksonville, Florida. And the American people are what's blocking MAGA. It's this incredible passion and patriotism that we're seeing, this love of country that's imbued into our system. And so people ask me, like, why aren't we seeing the kind of protests we're seeing in Israel? We're seeing it through the elections. That's where our protest has been.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting. I mean, I just think this is a time where if we can get to the other side, I think we'll have strengthened American democracy in very powerful ways. But it's why we have to win, right? We have no choice.
Yeah, we had several tens of thousands. I don't remember the exact number, 20 to 30,000 Daily Kos readers that were actually making phone calls remotely into Wisconsin, helping the Democratic effort. So
incredible.
It's definitely, it's the, the conservative movement never rested. They spent 50 years undermining abortion to the point where they finally won. And we had this sort of mentality where the presidency was everything. Oh, it's Bernie Sanders or it's Howard Dean and then once, we'd win the White House, it was like mission accomplished, shake our hands and then walk away and chill. And the other side never stopped organizing, win or lose. And now we're finally at that place where, Joe Biden won and nobody said mission accomplished, we're done, clearly. And then last year really underscored that point in a way that I think shook up everybody's expectations about politics. Big part of that, obviously, is abortion. And Carrie and I were talking about abortion as a definitive issue from the day from before the leak. Even we knew it was coming, and we when we had our case about why we were going to win or at least minimize losses in the midterm election, it was because one is because of abortion, and two was because of Donald Trump not getting off the stage, which sort of morphed into democracy, just a general defense of democracy. And it is amazing to me that Republicans have not given up on abortion. They seem to be doubling down. Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chair, she said that the problem isn't the issue. The problem is their messaging. And they keep going back to like the messaging. They don't realize that the message is the problem. As that quote that Carrie just read, it's the message saying if we could at least show some compassion, but their policies have no compassion. They're inherently cruel. So do you see any way of them getting out of that trap? Or are they destined into the sort of death spiral, both demographic, because like you talk about the youth and key demographics, suburban voters are turning against them because of those issues, or they just keep losing in perpetuity for who knows how long.
Yeah, listen, I think the key thing here is that they are in this. Their party's been overtaken by extremism and extremists. I mean, that's what's happened. And they're not operating really any longer through a traditional political physics, right? I mean, Ron DeSantis, I'll give you an example. In Florida, his 6-week abortion ban is polling at 22% in Florida. His permitless carry bill is polling at 23% in Florida. You only do those
not nationally, in
Florida, right? And so if you repeatedly pursue policies that are in the 20s and 30s, knowing that you're going to be alienating a large majority of the public, that's almost a definition of a party that's been overtaken by extremism, right? And it's almost like a textbook definition. And I think it's why what we have to hope is the path forward here is that we beat them in elections, the grip of MAGA gets loosened, and something like a more traditional center-right party emerges. The obvious worrisome thing is that they recognize that they're never going to win national elections again. They've only broken 50% of the vote once in the last 8 presidential elections. It's the worst popular vote performance in the history of American politics, right?
And a reminder that 8 presidential elections is over 30 years.
It's over, going back to 1992. And that, we've had the best run at the popular vote level of any political party in American history in the last 8 elections. No one's won more votes 7 out of 8 times as we have. And the obvious fear, Marcos, and the thing you were implying, and Carrie, you mentioned this earlier, is that they approach this now through a lens of illiberalism, where the only way they can maintain power is through cheating or rigging the rules and essentially trying to create an American apartheid of some kind, where a minority is able to, through gaming the system, able to extract extraordinary control. We've already seen this in North Carolina and Wisconsin, where
the U.S. Supreme Court is part of that system.
And in both of those states, by the way, after Democratic governors won, the legislatures changed what governors could do to basically strip power away from the governor, right? I mean, they're at this level of gamesmanship here. And the question is, does that continue to escalate? And we saw, look, once a political party tries to overthrow an illegitimate election, as it did 2 years ago, which we just can't forget, they're really capable of doing anything, right? And we shouldn't be surprised by any of these efforts around to maintain power without winning elections, which is, what in essence is the core political strategy of the Republican Party now. Right. The way we counteract that is by what Marcos said, is by getting to 55, right? And the election isn't close. It's a definitive outcome. Joe Biden won by 4.5 points. There was no way for Trump to claim, that he had been cheated out of the election. And it's our burden now that we're going to have to do that. I mean, it's just what we have to do, given their manipulation, given their games. I mean, remember, Trump not only, led an insurrection, but he tried to screw with the post office. They actually corrupted the census, right? These are things that are in the Constitution. They've touched and tried to break everything. And that's why I'll just say for you and what you decide to do, the two states that we as a nation, as Democrats, pro-democracy people, have to help liberate in the next couple of years are Wisconsin and North Carolina, where we were unable to unravel some of the gerrymandering that had taken place in Pennsylvania and Michigan. But the two places where an extremist group has unchecked power, in essence, now are in Wisconsin and North Carolina. And that's why that victory was so significant. And it's why, to me, the most important expansion state for the Democrats in 2024 is North Carolina. We have to make that a major priority. I'm going to be doing a lot of work there. And I think we can do there what we did in Virginia and in Georgia and in Arizona. But we got to put in the work, and we've got to do the registration, change the electorate, get more of our voters to vote, and to help liberate a state that's been over, where the legislature now has a supermajority in the House and Senate in a state that's a 50-50 state. It's just crazy.
Let me just, I want to go back to, God, I love this conversation. Anyway, let me just recap everything we've said. No, I'm kidding. I want to just reiterate a point about how much power we have together as Democrats, or as a pro-democracy movement, not just Democrats, but everybody who is, part of a pro-democracy movement. One thing I learned, I learned a lot of lessons, and I always go back to them from covering the LGBTQ movement between, the mid-aughts when the gay marriage bans came into being, and, about 2015, 2016, when same-sex marriage became legal. And, we always used to, one thing that would happen is the LGBTQ community never seemed to have one voice that really spoke for everyone. And there was good reason for that. It's because we're LGBTQ, it's like, the trans folks have like different needs and sort of a different perspective than gay men do. Gay men of 70 years of age have a different perspective than gay men of 20-year-olds, lesbians have different ideas, different things, that they're looking towards, then there's a whole generation that identifies as queer or non-binary or whatever. It just keeps growing, right? Yep. So there was never legitimately, the Human Rights Campaign was sort of the most known lobby, and frankly, the only organization that had actual lobbyists on the Hill, but there was never one voice, right? And I used to see that as a downside. Like, where was our Al Sharpton when something went wrong? Or, and that's the more present day. Like, you're thinking MLK, right? But that's obviously a generation ago. And what I realized was eventually that what was much more powerful wasn't having one voice that represented everybody. It was everybody's voice and their ability to affect the people immediately around them by telling their coming out story. So the people of their own religion, the people of their own ethnicity, the people in their immediate family, their friends, neighbors, right? This was a much more powerful lateral movement in that way. And so I am very encouraged by us sort of democratizing how we go about winning these elections, right? The message that you're sending out through the Hopium memos, the message that we can send out through Daily Kos. I focus a lot on messaging and how people can talk about the issues, because how every one of us talks about the issues matters, and the mindset that we take going into that, right? So I found that what we're doing now seems very, as a pro-democracy movement, coming from different, all different directions, from the Bill Kristols of the world to the Black Lives Matter movement, like that whole spectrum. Everybody has a voice and everybody can make a difference.
Well, Kara, I think you're saying something really important. That is one of the reasons I've changed the way that I'm engaging with politics, which is, I often will tell people on my site and in my commentary that stop waiting, for what the DNC is going to do or what Joe Biden's going to do. What are you going to do, right? I mean, what is your role? What, as a proud patriot, lover of your country, I think that what's happened is that a lot of people feel deeply empowered. We have to create permission structure for people to recognize that the only way we win is if we all do this together, that this isn't any one person's responsibility. It's all of our responsibilities. It's much better if the war room is 4 million people getting up every day, being really loud, than 20 kids drinking Red Bulls, producing videos, right? And I think that's what's already happened. I mean, I think to a degree that this country, the media and the elites in Washington don't really understand is there's been a citizen revolution in the country, or a citizen uprising. It's just happened through electoral means, not through large demonstrations and rallies like you're seeing in, Tel Aviv. I think it's also in part because I don't know that people always feel safe any longer because of all the gun violence in the United States. I don't know that our mechanism for protest is going to be in traditional protesting in that way. I think we're going to protest in other ways. And I think, yes, it's networked, it's decentralized. That's a much more powerful way of this happening than it being top down and being run by anybody. I mean, look, let's just be really honest, right? I mean, Joe Biden was not a field general leading us into this last election. And, I think it's one of the reasons that we did so well. And I don't mean that to be critical of Joe Biden. I mean that people felt that it wasn't going to get done unless they did it. And that's where we are now. And that's a deeply, deeply powerful place than thinking that, well, it's Joe's job, or it's Jamie Harrison's job, or it's those 3 people in Washington. They have to go do it. And I think what's happening is people realize, well, I got to do it myself. And you're seeing more and more Americans take meaningful action into their politics. They get more comfortable. I mean, one of the things that was really cool on my new site was that, I was encouraging people to make calls into Wisconsin, and there were people writing like, I've never made phone calls before. And then reporting back, like, I made calls. It was really fun, right? And like other people like, okay, I'll do it too. And so you're seeing this kind of like, this sense that rather than having an anxiety and fear, we're channeling that into constructive action, and that we are winning, and we're powerful, and we're strong. And that's why we have to keep getting bigger and expanding and getting stronger, which I think we can do. I mean, the idea of expansion comes from a position of strength, not a position of weakness. We're in a very strong position right now. And Marcos, we've known each other a long time. And I don't know that the Democratic Party has ever been stronger, than it is today. Certainly since I've been in the business. We're regularly breaking 50%. We're outraising the Republicans by huge margins. We have a huge, incredibly wonderful new generation of political leaders emerging. We're seeing youth activism that is potentially unprecedented in 40, 50 years. This is exciting. We're part of a winning team here now, and we have to keep going.
Yeah, I would add that the Republicans' traditional advantage in messaging machine, like Fox News, has been completely eroded, not just by their own lies and the comeuppance are getting the Dominion lawsuit, but also in the rise of certain social media that have empowered people to take charge of their own politics, whether it's Twitter or TikTok or even Democrats. Elected officials have responded and now are being aggressive. Like when the judge in Texas tried or, invalidated the day after pill nationally, governors across the country, Democratic governors came out and said, yeah, we're not paying attention to that, illegal ruling. Yeah. And so there's this, we've come a long way as a party from the safe, rare, and legal. Ooh, let's not talk about abortion because it's icky. And let's definitely not talk about, civil unions, not even civil unions. That's crazy talk. To where we are today, where Democrats are they're feeling that strength that you talk about. And it's taken a while. And I think now after Wisconsin last week, this is the first time I've seen Republicans starting to second guess each other. They've always been so certain about their supremacy ideologically and popularity wise. And the numbers never back them up, but they pretended. They're finally starting to sort of doubt themselves. And it's a real weird change. So you can find Simon Rosenberg at Hopium Chronicles with Simon Rosenberg on Substack. And
subscribe. It's free, by the way. It's free. So just come on over. The water's warm. We got a cool community, lots of political analysis, live events, fun stuff. And it's been really fun doing all this. I'm just following your footsteps, Marcos, 20 years later. Right? It took me,
come on.
I stayed with the traditional DC organization for too long. You innovated and built this incredible world, starting 20 years ago. And, now groups like Courier Newsroom and Resolute Square, they're all descendants. They're your children, right? I mean, these are your kids from you, and having been one of the main innovators in building a different kind of politics for us. So it's always great to see you. I think some of the work we did together was among the most. And when I look back at my career, the work we did in the early days of blogging was some of the most joyful and fun work that I ever did in politics. So I'm here
great.
whenever you need me. Just invite me back.
We will, Simon.
Brother in arms.
Yeah, thanks so much. You're very kind, Simon. I appreciate all of that. And I just want to add that we've been talking about this aspirational 55%. If you go to Simon's Substack, he actually lays out numbers and the math on how to get there. So this isn't a made up number that we're just going to randomly hit because we all, made a
I
few
want to
more
get to
phone calls.
57. No,
He has an actual roadmap on how to get there, and it's a very achievable roadmap, and it's great material. So again, that's Hopium Chronicles with Simon Rosenberg on Substack. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Marcos.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Can I make one final point? Because we were talking about how the Democratic movement is sort of feeling its oats right now. And let me say something from sort of a 30,000-foot view, which I enjoy, which is part of the reason for that is I think that for the longest time since 1992, since Bill Clinton's electoral success, right? The whole idea was to sort of, if we can just skim some off of like the natural Republican base, right? We're going to try to be a little bit more Christian. We're not going to go full same-sex marriage. We're going to try to split the baby with civil unions.
Third way.
States' rights. Yeah, third way. We're going to try and find a third way, right? Like, so that was for, almost a solid 2 decades. That was the conventional wisdom and the prevailing thought among the Democratic Party was that Republicans were really better than this. And we were just kind of trying to trick some people into voting for us because we still believed our ideas were better, but we had to sort of mask them with, conservative language so that people would still feel comfortable voting for us. What's happened now, and I think it happened somewhere between 2016 and 2020, and maybe it started in 2018, was that it became clear that Democratic ideas were actually better. They were more popular. They were more profound. They were better for everybody. Now, we need a counterbalance, right? No party left to its own devices is perfect. You need to have a little bit of a counterbalance, but we're not trying to skim people from like a conservative or a Republican Party that we think is, better equipped than we are. What we're actually doing is we're running on the strength of our policies because their policies are absolute crap, right? And our policies are better. Our pro-democracy, our ideals are better. Our the core of our party is better. It's not bankrupt. It's not rotten to the core the way the Republicans are at this point. So I think that's part of the reason that Democrats are sort of, feeling this power is that we're not trying to just sort of shroud ourselves a little bit so that people will find us palatable enough to vote for us. This is who we are. This is who we are. I'm proud about it. I'm proud about it.
No, this speaks a lot to the midterm election where people were criticizing Joe Biden for ending the cycle with a speech on democracy. And people are like, people want to hear about the economy. It's the economy, stupid. The economy at the time was record high inflation, high gas prices, and that would have played to the Republican strengths, right? And so what the Democrats did is they played, they had a message that was abortion and democracy. Like, we're going to protect your rights and we're going to protect your democracy. And then people can make a decision because Republicans they were talking their usual crazy stuff, but a lot of it was inflation, Biden inflation, they called it. And people then could make a decision, like, what's more important to me? And this is what's so important about winning the William Crystals and the Sarah Longwell, former Republican, who's been a frequent guest on your show, your friend Sarah, we're not saying, what do you guys want? And we'll change. We'll do more of what you want. We're not doing that. We're saying, we're going to stand for democracy. We're going to stand for individual rights. Is that more important than the tax cuts that you want? And for the moment, they're saying the tax cuts can wait.
Right, exactly. They're saying democracy is clearly more important. We don't want to be a bunch of fascists. That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. And this is the beauty of the moment. And there may be a day when, there's a more pro-democracy Republican Party arises, and then we can get back to arguing over tax cuts for billionaires. And, that'll be great. Let's have that argument. Less regulation for businesses or whatever, right? We can have
Right.
those arguments at different time. And so this is what's been so exciting up at this moment. We don't have a Democratic Party that is running away from what it believes in, trying to theoretically pick up a group of people by being little less crazy than the Republicans. Like, we're like and they used to say that, like, okay, we'll cut Social Security, but not as much as Republicans want to. Like, no, that, we were like, what are you doing? Like, no, you stand for Social Security. You stand for what people have earned. And that's where we are as a party. Oh my God, it's such a relief, Carrie. Because it's made a difference. It's more fun.
It's such a relief. It's way more fun. Winning's more fun. Being who you are, I know this as a queer person, is more fun than not being who you are. Like, it
Whoa.
is literally liberating. And that is, I think, that's kind of what Simon Rosenberg is saying. This is liberating. This feels good. It feels like we're hitting our stride. And I totally agree with all of that. And it makes it fun then to be involved in the movement.
Yeah, and which is why suddenly saying, you know what, we've gotten pretty good at winning 51. That's not good enough anymore. Let's go to 55. And again, people think, oh, it's just 4 points. That 4 points, a difference between, winning by 2 points
Huge.
And maybe losing by 2 points if you get some big. We lost a Senate race in North Carolina that we were winning in the polls because the 2 weeks before the election, turns out he was sexting some woman, and he was married, right? So
you're talking about 2020 now. You're not 2022, 2020. Mm-hmm.
And we lost, by like 1 or 2 points. It was like literally a 2-point shift. If you're, hitting 55, then whatever, you win by 53. Boo-hoo, like we won. That's what matters. And so that's where we need to. I love, like you said, it's aspirational, but it's very, very reachable. And again, you can find the details. And Carrie, I assume you're going to be writing about this because this is such good stuff. Too.
Yeah. It's so good. It's such good stuff. I will definitely be incorporating it in my work for sure.
So it is the Hopium Chronicles with Simon Rosenberg. So I think that's our show for today. Carrie, thank you so much for being, as always, the most amazing co-host. This is so fun. I love doing this. This is a highlight of the week. Thanks to Simon Rosenberg, again, longtime friend and an amazing analyst. You can find him at Hopium Chronicles with Simon Rosenberg. Thanks to Walter for producing, and thanks to Paul for helping out behind the scenes. Thanks you, the viewer and the listener and the reader, for being part of this amazing movement for our democracy. This is getting fun, guys. This is fun. And next year, let's not try to just win the election. Let's try to get that 55% in all the key states, and maybe let's get North Carolina, like Simon's saying. Let's get North Carolina in the blue column. We got a lot of really fun projects to work on. We can actually not just hold the White House, but retake the House. And the Senate's tough, but we're going to hold the Senate. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. So thank you so much for being part of that journey. Could not do this without you. You guys are the best. I love you all. Thanks, everybody. Catch you all next week.